Hello everybody, my name is Nick Dinsmore. This is the Nick Dinsmore YouTube channel series, My Story, where I am telling my story as best I can remember chronologically. You know, the best thing about having your own action figure is that you get to play with yourself in public. Irregardless, action figures like this of Eugene can be signed and purchased at MidwestAllPro.com. Be sure and like, share, subscribe to the Nick Dinsmore YouTube channel, leave a comment, and let's get into today's story. Where we left off was 1997, USWA. We were selling out arenas everywhere. Nick Dinsmore was over and drawing all kinds of people. In actuality, I had almost a year of training under my belt and less matches. I was always told that it's not necessarily how long you've been training or in wrestling, it's how many matches you've had in front of people. And at that point, I don't know how many I had, but I was still pretty green, but I had a good attitude and I was athletic and I was young and I was ready to go. USWA, June 14th, 1997, Memphis TV, Channel 5 Studios, Nick Dinsmore and Flash Flanagan, the new tag team babyface, had a vicious match, brawling all over the place with Big Bad and Blonde, which was Mike Samples and Vic the Bruiser. That night, Flash and I went to the big one in Memphis, and we beat the Truth Commission for the USWA Tag Team titles. I was on cloud nine. But like I had said, the agreement that I had reached with USWA and my trainer, Danny Davis, was that I was available any day of the week except for Sundays. Which was fine because USWA never ran on Sundays. Never ran on Sundays. Except for Sunday, July 13th, I believe. And at that point, I told Danny, hey, I got booked for USWA coming up on July 13th. And he, to put it lightly, was not happy. And he said, the deal is you have to work here every Sunday. And USWA doesn't get you on Sunday. So you got to make a decision, make a choice. And at that point, it was probably one of the first big decisions in my career that I had to make. Was I going to stay with the Nightmare Danny Davis and wrestle once a week? Or was I going to try to venture out in the USWA, which not necessarily was booking me consistently, and had come under new management? Now I'm going to get into this quickly, the USWA Stooge Report. I ain't one to gossip, so you didn't hear this from me. Just what I found online. Anyway, Jerry Jarrett sold his one half of USWA to Jerry Lawler. So Jerry Lawler now owned 100%. Jerry Lawler then in turn sold a percentage, I'm not sure, or all of it maybe, to a gentleman by the name of Larry Burton. I had met Larry Burton when I first started wrestling in USWA. And like I said, I've generally been able to get the aura of the person that I'm around. And he was a gentleman that can only be characterized by the events that we're going to talk about next. I'm going to let you form your own opinion. That's what I'm saying. But the minute I met him, I think I knew. Ringthedamnbell.wordpress.com's The Death of Pro Wrestling's Last Territory, the USWA, posted on December 21st, 2016 by Brian Damage. After a while, Jerry Jarrett decided to walk away from the USWA and sold his half the company to Jerry the King Lawler. Love the King, who was already half owner of the USWA, for an estimated $250,000, giving Jerry Lawler 100% ownership. At this time, a businessman named Larry Burton wanted to purchase a portion of the USWA from Lawler, with plans to sell the USWA and all its properties to Vince McMahon for roughly $6 million. Burton brought in a Cleveland businessman named Mark Seltzer to invest in the USWA and buy a stake in it. Seltzer was under the impression that the USWA was a big national promotion based on all the syndicated TV deals that the company had. Seltzer would invest over $2 million for 50% ownership of the USWA. So Larry Burton was the gentleman that was trying to get in on the USWA in its final days. And I remember hearing Jerry the King Lawler on his podcast speaking about this event. I never met at least I don't remember meeting the Mark Seltzer, who owned Excel Sports Limited and was coming in to buy, I believe, USWA's advertising time is what they wanted, because USWA had about 250, 230 cable outlets across the country. So if you wrestled on USWA, not only were you seen in Memphis and Louisville and Evansville and Nashville, but that was broadcast all over the country at that time. And that was the big interest, the big carrot to these guys, is they wanted that advertising time. From Wikipedia, although Jerry Lawler was working for the WWF at the time, he and Larry Burton ended up buying USWA from Jerry Jarrett. I'm not sure if they both bought it or if King bought it and then sold it to Burton. I don't know exactly what happened. Immediately selling it to businessman Mark Selker's company, XL Sports Limited. In early 97, USWA went out of business by November of that year. Pardon me. The USWA went out of business by November of that year, resulting in a nasty lawsuit between Burton, Selker, and Lawler. In a RICO civil trial, a federal district court jury in Cleveland, Ohio, eventually returned a verdict on which judgment was entered. The jury determined that Larry Burton and his son, Jason Berkman, had engaged in racketeering and awarded XL Sports damages in the amount of over $250,000. The jury determined that Mr. Burton was liable for fraud and conversion and awarded XL Sports $235,000 in compensation damages, $3.3 million in punitive damages, United States Court of 6 PLL penalties, judgments, Long story short, I chose to go with Danny Davis. It was my dream to wrestle, and USWA was the last territory, and I no-showed them on Saturday, July 13th, essentially turning in my notice. Wasn't the way you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to give 2 weeks notice back then, month notice, whatever it was. Long story short, I no-showed the USWA. I knew I would be fired. But at that time, with the Larry Burton had started to take over, it wasn't the behind the curtain. I don't know. I was young, I was inexperienced, and it didn't feel like the right way to go, so I didn't go that way. I told you at the time there was an issue with Mantar who beat me up, but by that point, the WWF guys had gone on, at least the Truth Commission had gone on to Monday Night Raw, where they debuted. And I had heard through the grapevine, I don't know if this is true, the night that I no-showed the USWA was the night that JC, Ice, and Wolfie D returned to the USWA, the big one in Memphis. And there was going to be a big battle between Flash Flanagan and Nick Dinsmore and PG-13. And because I wasn't there, that of course didn't take place. I believe Stephen Dunn started tagging with Flash, or started again tagging with Flash. He had tagged with him before. But apparently someone needed to get some color that night, and it was supposed to be young Nick Dinsmore. I had heard through the grapevine that Larry Burton says, well, Nick should get the color tonight. I heard through the grapevine that Mike Sample says, I don't think he's ever done it. I don't think we should do it on him. Larry Burton says, I'll make Jamie do it on him. I love Jamie Dundee. But even back then, I was nearly 200 pounds of solid muscle. Jamie wasn't. He was much smaller than me. And to think that Jamie Dundee would go into business for himself or for someone else and color someone, it's a ridiculous thought. In the end, I believe I made the right decision by no-showing USWA. And although I wish my run could have been longer, USWA closed up in November. But somewhere between July and August 1997 in Louisville, the Nightmare Danny Davis School of Professional Wrestling was changing into Ohio Valley Wrestling. And at that point, OVW was going to get local television because the USWA television had either already ended in Louisville or was coming to an end. And at that time, a group of Danny's locker room branched off and started their own wrestling company and started TV before OVW could get our TV on in Louisville. And it was Mike Samples, who led Jerry Faith and Troy Hayes, who were the Phantoms, also known as the Shooting Stars, Flash Flanagan, Vic the Bruiser, and Sean Venom, as best I can remember, was the group that started Kentuckiana Championship Wrestling. And it was kind of a knife in the back to Danny because we were all supposed to be a group starting this company. Well, not all of us in a group, but we were the locker room. Danny and Mike were the office. And they were going to start this company, and Mike went behind Danny and started his own company. And again, this is from my point of view, being 20, 21 years old at the time, and just listening, not really knowing exactly what's going on. This is what I was perceiving. But the long and short of it is all of a sudden on Saturday mornings we see Kentucky Championship Wrestling. And apparently, whoever the person was, Mike Samples or Jerry and Troy, went around to a lot of the other wrestlers. Hey, come to Kentucky Championship Wrestling. We're going to get TV. We're going to make money. We're going to sell out arenas everywhere. And I think they went down around to everybody in the locker room except for me. I was the only guy that I knew of that wasn't approached by Kentucky Championship Wrestling. I remember asking Danny one time, why did Mike never approach me? Danny said it's because he thought you were never going to make it. Long story short, in late 97, the group that went to Kentucky Championship Wrestling left, and we were left with a locker room of myself, the heart and soul of OVW, which was Trailer Park Trash, Jason Lee, David Bell was there, Cousin Crazy, David C., referee Robert Briscoe was there. Now, Doug Basham had trained with Danny years prior. Doug at the time had ceased wrestling, and he was in the workforce, working at Ford Motor Company, I believe, with a good job. Doug would enter the picture later, but in August of 1997 is when Rob Conway enrolled. And at that point, that was our new locker room. And although a huge majority of guys with experience had left and decided to go to Kentucky Championship Wrestling, which I think fizzled out in 2 or 3 months. I don't even believe they were around for 4 months. I don't even know how many shows they ran. I don't remember. But after that, Flash eventually came back to OVW. Vic the Bruiser eventually came back. But those guys we saw them around town, and we weren't unfriendly with our friends, but it was an awkward situation. And me being young and green and inexperienced, I was like, not really sure how to take it and do it. But like I said, August of 97, Rob Conway enrolled, and that's when things started to build, started to take off. Rip Rogers came back. I believe he was wrestling in the Maritimes, and he came back and started wrestling there with us. He would bring in 3 gentlemen. He would bring in Dave the Rave. He would bring in Lucky Scott Sandlin. And then he would bring in a gentleman by the name of The Real Deal Rod Steele. And at some point, I will do a video on those 3 guys, especially the Steel Man, Rod Steele. But as for right now, 97, Rob starts, and all of the cable outlets that USWA held, this is what I was told, at the time, 230 to 250 cable outlets, when USWA ceased producing television, were picked up by Music City Wrestling, which was a small company based in Nashville, Tennessee. Burt Prentice was the promoter, and I started going down to Nashville. They would tape their TV, I believe, on a Friday night in the Nashville Fairgrounds, and then we would do the big event, which was at the Nashville Fairgrounds the very next night, Saturday night. TV would air Saturday morning. So we started doing TV in Nashville for Music City in 97. Shortly after that, Rob had gotten fully trained, had his first match, and when he came down to Music City Wrestling, things really exploded for he and I and everybody kind of in the territory. But as it stands right now, Music City Wrestling started in, hold on, let me get my, I believe November of 1997 is when Music City Wrestling started. I remember going down to the Nashville Fairgrounds. A lot of the guys that were around the USW locker room were now in Music City. Doug Gilbert was there, Wolfie D was there, Jimmy Dundee, Brickhouse Brown, the Colorado Kid. And I ended up winning I ended up co-winning the 1997 Rookie of the Year for Music City Wrestling, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. It was myself and another gentleman by the name of Style and Shane Eden. Style and Shane and I were the 2 baby faces, the big baby faces. Yay! In Music City Wrestling down there in Nashville. And the reason that I got over in Music City Wrestling, the reason that I got over in Nashville was because out and out Dutch Mantell. I wrestled Dutch Mantell at the Nashville Fairgrounds 2 weeks in a row. The first week, we went to a 10-minute time limit draw. Dutch led me the whole way. At the end, he shook my hand and then proceeded to jump me and beat the bejesus out of the young green baby face. And the next week when we came back, Dutch led me through a fiery match where the whip broke out. We got wild and crazy in the stands and showed that Nick Dinsmore could fight and would stand up for himself. And after that moment, I was made in that building in Nashville, the Nashville Fairgrounds, all because of Dutch Mantell. He knew how to take what was around him and say, okay, I can get this guy over. Take my hand, kid, let's go. And he led me the whole way. We will get into more of Music City Wrestling and getting into some of the bigger events. 1998 was a huge year for Nick Dinsmore. But as it stands right now, we're going to stop this video. Please like, subscribe, comment, share. Follow me on all of my other social media platforms, as well as Midwest All Pro Wrestling and their social media platforms. I've just been sitting here all morning troubling myself, like, if two vegetarians get in an argument, is it still called a beef?